Hey guys, this is Luke from Makes It Made Simple, and today I'm going to be talking about the Ableton glue compressor. I'm going to talk about how it got its name, go over some of the parameters of the compressor, and I'm going to show you how we can use the compressor on different groups of instruments, the master bus, and also how we can use the EQ function to single out certain frequency ranges, like if you are compressing a drum group, for example. So let's go ahead and get started. I am going to go through each of the parameters on the glue compressor, which are pretty much the same as any compressor. So if that's something you want to skip and you just want to skip to the part of the video where I'm using the compressor like on instrument groups, I'll have the timestamps for the entire video in the description below. So the Ableton glue compressor actually is the Satomic glue compressor. They like partnered together, and that's why Ableton comes with this glue compressor, which is pretty much just modeled after the classic SSL master bus compressor, which you can see here. This is actually the Waves version of it, and I just wanted to show you. If you put them side by side, you can see that the Ableton compressor and the SSL compressor have pretty much all of the same exact controls. So I just wanted to show you that before we get started, and also just it shows how powerful the Ableton stock glue compressor really is. Okay, so looking at the glue compressor, we have pretty much all of the standard parameters that a compressor would have. We've got the attack time, which is how quickly the compressor is going to start working once the signal gets past the threshold. And then we have the threshold here, which is, the lower the threshold goes, the more compression to the signal we're doing. Next, we've got the release time, which is how quickly the compressor is going to reset after the signal stops. And so faster release time is going to add more sustain. So the way you can think about this is if we compress something and then that compressor resets kind of fast, well, we've compressed down the signal, but now it's lifting back up because that compressor is getting reset. And so a longer release time is just, it's basically going to keep that signal compressed for much longer. And then we've got the ratio, which is how much compression we're doing to the signal once it goes past the threshold. So for every 4 dB that goes past the threshold, only 1 dB is actually getting let through. And speaking of threshold and ratio, so typically a high ratio, this is just kind of a rule of thumb you can remember that works really well. A high ratio works really well with a high threshold. So like a 10-to-1 ratio, meaning that we're going to be compressing a lot, not a lot's going to get let through, works really well for catching peaks. This is oftentimes like we have like a limiter. A limiter is essentially just a compressor with an infinite to 1 ratio, and so it works well to catch those peaks. And then a lower ratio works well with lower thresholds, and I'm going to show you examples of this in a second. So we've got ratio, threshold, makeup gain. So the makeup gain is just the gain that we're adding to it, because obviously once you compress a signal, we're going to be quieting it down a bit. That when you lower that threshold, the signal is going to get quieter. So in order to make up for the lost gain, we use the makeup gain, which now adds that gain back in. We've got the dry wet, which is just like any plugin. It's just how much of the compressor is actually turned on. So if we go down to like 50%, then this is technically parallel compression. It's got 50% of the compressors on, 50% of it's off. I don't like to do parallel compression that way because I don't think you have that much control over the signal doing it, but that's what that knob is for. So I'm going to go back and leave this here. The range function, I never use this, and I don't really see any reason to use it, but it's essentially, if you set this, it would limit the amount of gain reduction you can do. So hypothetically, if you set it to 4 dB, then you're only going to be able to do 4 dB of compression, essentially. But that's not something I've ever used. If I'm going to compress something, I know what I'm doing. I know how I'm going to be compressing. I don't need to have something limiting for it. Maybe that's something I'll explore, get into more, but it's just not something I've ever had to use, but that's really all it does. This clip mode basically turns the compressor into a clipper. Now the threshold and everything you're doing with the compressor is still going to compress, but then what happens is now if it gets to 0 dB, it's going to start to clip the signal, and clipping is like a whole topic for a whole nother video. I'm not going to get into that right now, but basically this turns it, you can either use the glue compressor just as a clipper, and so if you put any gain into this and this starts to light up and flash, you're going to start clipping, or if you're compressing and you still start to see this clip light up after the compression you're going to do, you're going to be getting some clipping on top of the compression as well. And sorry if you hear my dog barking in the background. Okay, and the last thing is that if you go ahead and click this little button to expand it, what we have here is we've got the sidechain button, which sidechain, I'm sure you might already know this, but sidechaining is basically when if you click this button on, the compressor is going to be triggered by an outside input. And so just for example, you can click the sidechain button, put this on a bass or any instrument, for example, and then if you get the input from the kick drum, then every time the kick drum hits, it's going to duck, the signal that is being sidechained to that kick drum. And so that's how we get that classic EDM pumping and breathing sound, that wah, wah, wah sound, is by using sidechain. Before we get to everything is that on the glue compressor, there's not a knee function, and typically a knee function is something where you can basically, if you have a harder knee, it's going to essentially make the compressor more aggressive, more less transparent. You're going to hear the compression. A softer knee is going to be a more transparent compression. You won't necessarily hear the compression as much, and it's going to be a little bit more transparent. Knee is one of those things that's kind of hard to explain, but you know it when you hear it. But the way that on the glue compressor is basically a higher ratio. The higher the ratio, the more it's going to be like more of a hard knee. And if you read the manual about the glue compressor, it actually says that in the manual that a higher ratio is going to have more of a hard knee, lower ratio will be more of a soft knee effect. Okay, so those are all the effects explained. Now let's get into some really cool examples of using the glue compressor in action. Okay, so the first example I want to show you is on this group of pianos here. So I've got these pianos that I've got layered together. I'll go ahead and play them as a group without any compression on them at all. So let's go ahead and take a listen. And just so you can hear each individual layer that adds up to this, I've got this kind of melodic part of the piano this is the part that I want to more emphasize. So this is just an M1. And then I've got the actual chords here. Got that nice sounding chord. This is just a contact piano that I'm layering in. It's like the giant, just to kind of layer, if they layer these together. It's just going to add a little bit of like low end, like more thickness to it. And in fact, I could probably like EQ it a little bit better, but I'll get to that later. And then finally, I've got this pluck sound. It's not a piano, but it's just going to be adding some attack to the piano. And so that's how I layer these to make that sound. And now let's go ahead and I'll just do some compression here. So I kind of want to have more of a compressed sound where there's more energy, there's less dynamics going on. And so I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to set this to a slow attack, and then I'm going to go ahead and just start to dial in this compressor as I'm playing this loop. So let's go ahead and just keep your ear open for what's going on. So you can hear if I have a really slow attack or a fairly slow attack, 30 milliseconds, then I'm starting to emphasize the attack. And then watch what happens. I'm going to slowly dial back the attack, and you'll start to hear that the volume will get lower, and you'll start to hear that initial attack get more compressed. It'll kind of, it'll be less attacky. But so let's just go ahead and just take a listen to how it sounds. And I'll crank up that makeup gain to really make sure this is even. So I actually really like it on 3 milliseconds. It keeps enough of the attack in there, but it's also compressing. It's giving that nice glued, compressed sound that I want, that I'm going for. Let's just for example, go ahead and move the attack all the way down to the fastest attack just to go ahead and hear what it does to the sound. And I'm actually going to go ahead and turn off. I have an effect on this crystallizer that I'm going to go ahead and turn off just so we can hear the pianos a little bit better. So you can hear that with that really fast attack time, it's kind of taking away some of the attack of the piano. So it almost sounds better without any compression on it at all. Like that's just too much, but then what we can do is if we just dial this back, like I said, I like 3 milliseconds a bit, so let's go ahead and dial it back until we get the sound that we want. Okay, now let's hear before and after. So here's with it off. Now on. So you can hear how that's, you can hear what it's doing to the pianos. It's like gluing them together, adding a little bit more of attack, getting that nice compressed, like punchy sound. And it's also placing it in the mix a little bit better. So then if I play it when the drop comes in right here, you'll be able to kind of hear it better. Let's go ahead and take a listen. And I actually added some other effects to these pianos as well. Some clipping, saturation, and then OTT. So let's go ahead and hear it with those on. And you can hear what they sound like, just the pianos by themselves. The OTT is adding a little bit of volume there, so it's kind of making it pop out a little bit more. And I have a really low percentage, but it's also adding some more of that high end to the piano as well. So anyway, not to keep going on too much about that, but that's what I would do with glue compressor on a group like the pianos to kind of give that nice compressed sound and glue them together. The next thing I'll show you is I'll go down here to drums. I actually haven't done anything to these drums yet, and I'm going to turn off the kick drum because I like to route the kick drum to the master usually, and that way when I do any effects on the drum group, I'm only affecting all of these, and then I don't, I just like to have the kick sound, you know, a certain way. Actually these plugins here, I'm not going to have these on. These were just for demonstration purposes, and so for like another video. And so I like to have the kick routed out, and then if I just play the drums right here. So what I'll show you real quick what we can do with a glue compressor on the drums. Similar thing, I'm just going to go ahead, I'll do a slow attack, kind of a fast release, and then let's go ahead and just play it and then dial in the threshold and makeup gain. So it's more subtle, but here, I'll actually loop it right here so nothing changes. It's more subtle, but you can hear. You hear how right there, they just sound like they are, it's almost hard to even explain. It's like, it just sounds more tight with the compression on. And so with the compression, what you're doing with a certain, like that hat sound, for example, when I compress stuff and lower the volume and then I add the makeup gain, it's allowing stuff that would otherwise kind of get more lost to kind of come up front. And then it's the stuff that's kind of more loud kind of quiets it down. So let's just take a listen one more time. And let's do a slow attack again. And then let's just go ahead. Okay. So here's with it off. Now on. Just kind of emphasizing the hat a little bit, making it stick out a little bit. Let's go ahead and just do a really fast attack time, see how it sounds. See, and that's where we get into squashing the transient, so that hat is kind of taking away the pop, the transient of the hat, and we don't want that. So let's slowly move up the attack time until we get something we want. So I do like that better, but there is a case to be made to use something maybe like the 0.3 milliseconds. Because maybe we want to actually smooth over the transient of something like a hat, you know. I don't necessarily need the hat to have a really popped out kind of sound. So maybe I kind of want to fit it more in the background. Let's go ahead and take a listen in the context of the entire drop. Let's go and crank up the makeup gain quite a bit so we can really hear those. Let's go ahead and go slower attack time. So I'm obviously adding some volume, but I'm actually not adding that much. But it's just kind of making them pop out a little bit more so that now in the context of the entire mix, the drums are just kind of like, you know, glued together, but also popping out a little bit more. And so I actually prefer that sound. So that's how I would do, add some glue compression on the mix. So that's the glue compressor in a nutshell. Those are some examples of how I use it, you know, on instruments and then groups of instruments, as well as honing in on different frequency ranges. So I hope that helps. Okay, so I hope that video helped. I hope you have more of an understanding of the glue compressor and go ahead and use all these examples in your own mixes. And if you made it to the end of this video, I'm actually going to give you a very special offer. So I'm a mixing mastering engineer, and if you want your track mixed and mastered by a pro, I'm offering you a really special discount. It's 50% off of your first mix. So if you go down in the description below, click the link to go to my mixing and mastering service and use code MMS50, I'll give you 50% off your first mix and master. So if you're wanting your track, if you're struggling with your track, or you just want your track to get to that professional level sound like right away, I would highly recommend letting me mix and master it for you. So once again, you know, it's a special offer for those of you who made it to the end of this video, because it is kind of a long video. So I really appreciate that. And yeah, I look forward to working with you, and I will see you guys again next time.